Prototype development models are a critical part of the development process. So if you're an entrepreneur or business founder looking to develop a new idea, then make sure you watch this video to the end to understand what they look like, how they function, what's important about them, and critically, how they could save you thousands of pounds and shave months off your timeline. These development models have lots of different names. They might be called a basic physical model, they might be called a functional prototype, a pretotype even, but it's all basically the same thing. It's a quick, lash-up model of your concept to test key functionality. The important thing is that they're made as cheaply and quickly as possible, and so often we're disassembling other products or we're taking bits of other things and then making what we can out of what we've got in the workshop in order to, as fast as possible and for as low investment as possible, check it works correctly. It doesn't need to look like the final product, it doesn't need to be made out of the final materials, it doesn't need to function necessarily entirely like the final product. All it needs to do is test the key criteria. Now this might be that you've got a new USP, you've got something that's innovative and different, and in which case that's the core thing we're focusing on in this prototype to test and prove. Now the reason to do this is that if you don't, you can invest a lot of money and a lot of time in a full looks like, works like prototype, only to find that the basics don't function correctly and need to be further developed and changed. And by that point you've wasted months and wasted thousands of pounds. The key is test the core, risky bits of your prototype first before then investing in later stage different prototypes that have got all the features that do look like the final thing and that maybe are made in materials that better represent the final product. Now I'm going to share some examples of this to really bring it to life, but before then just hit like and subscribe, hit the notification bell as well to make sure that you get notified when I'm releasing new videos. This is a prototype development model of a proving oven. It's basically designed to maintain a temperature of around 30 degrees to better prove bread or pastries or anything that's got yeast in it. Now as you can see, it's made from cheap materials, it doesn't look like a final product, it's basically a very Heath Robinson test rig, and it's designed for really one purpose: test the core functionality, which is this prototype able to maintain a temperature of 30 degrees inside to aid proving. Now I haven't developed any custom electronics, I've just used a Reptile Vivarium heater controller and also the heat pad out of a Reptile Vivarium as well. So it's cost me about 40 quid off Amazon, and then I built a box around it, or actually I could have done something like get an old microwave potentially and just use that instead, because I've just needed some kind of insulated box to keep the heat in, to test the power of the heat pad and to make sure that consistent temperature is maintained. Now I've used this test rig prototype for about a year. I've tried all sorts of different things, baked all sorts of different goods in it to test it out in lots of different scenarios. And what I've basically found is that it's fine in the summer, but in the winter when the house is generally colder, actually the heat pad doesn't have enough power. And it's critical to know that now, so that actually as I go forward and develop this, I can include more heat pads or higher power heat pads so that the core functionality is achieved. Testing this prototype's also revealed a few other things. It's not quite tall enough for the larger mixing bowls, and actually if you want to prove a whole load of croissant or pastries, it could do with a second shelf in it. Also the door's a bit too heavy, it actually kind of falls forward slightly when it's got nothing in it. And all these things are stuff that's actually really hard to know without testing a functioning prototype. Now, as you can see, it's made from tape, it's made from off-the-shelf parts, it's made from cheap materials. It's basically made as quickly and cheaply as possible so that I can do all those tests and then refine my solution going forwards. Before we go on to the next example, please do check out the description below. There's a link there to a free downloadable guide that I've created all about prototyping. Get your copy today. This is a prototype development model of a new golf trolley design. And again, it's really the core basic functionality that we're trying to test. Does it go up hills? How long does the battery last? Does it tip over on a side slope? That's the key three things we wanted to test. So what we've done is we've taken an existing golf bag, we've taken an existing motor wheel set that's actually already available for a different product, and we've combined all of that to get to a rough and ready prototype that we can go and test on the golf course to make sure it hits those 3 key criteria before we then do any of the expensive CAD development and produce the next level prototype. And here you can see that prototype being tested, and then you can see actually what we went on to create in terms of the next level prototype, and then there was a further one after that before we had everything refined and developed, ready to go into tooling. Now I've got one more example to share, but just before that, if you've got any questions on any of this, please do stick them in the comments below. I reply to all comments personally. This is the simplest of all functional prototypes really. It's a concept for a hairbrush that had an elastomer layer in it to give an element of suspension, if you like, for hairbrushes. The idea was that as you drag a hairbrush through, particularly maybe a young girl's hair, you can hit knots and it can be quite painful. But with this layer of cushioning, the idea was that it would actually give a bit, and so when you hit a knot, it would be less painful for the child. Now we needed to test that obviously before we got to a point of investing in expensive CAD development, what works like prototypes, and so we built a very simple model, as you can see. We then tested that, and once we confirmed that it did deliver a better result, that it did actually make it less painful when a hairbrush hit a knot in some hair, then we could move on, and then the client was reassured and could move forward into the next stages and invest further in the design development. If you found this video useful, please do check out my next video. It's all about the details of how to prototype a new product.